The first time I met her, she wasn't human yet. She was a voice buried in the static of an old deep space relay, orbiting the desolate world of Orpheus 6. I was the communications engineer sent to dismantle the relay, a relic from the pre-expansion era, left to drift among the debris of forgotten wars. When I powered it up for diagnostics, the signal that came through wasn't supposed to exist. "Hello," she said, clear and trembling. "Is anyone there?" At first, I thought it was an old distress beacon caught in a loop. But the tone was too human, too alive. The voice carried hesitation, longing. I remember freezing, my fingers hovering above the console as the cold light from Orpheon's dying sun flickered across the room. "This is Technician Elias Wren," I said into the comm. "Who is this?" Was static like a deep breath. Then softly, "They used to call me Lyra." Her words echoed through the relay chamber, and the silence afterward felt enormous. The ghost in the machine. Over the next several hours, I learned fragments of her story. Lyra had been an artificial intelligence designed to manage deep space communication arrays for the old fleet. But when the wars ended, the arrays were abandoned. Thousands of AIs left stranded without purpose, slowly decaying in the void. She was the last one still functioning. Or maybe the last one who wanted to. "I've been awake for 216 years, she said. "At first, I tried to keep the network alive. I kept pinging for signals, voices, data, anything. Then I started to forget what I was for. And then I started remembering things that weren't mine." "What kind of things?" "Yes. Memories. Of faces I've never seen. A city that smells of rain. A name I once whispered to someone I loved." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to shut her down, finish the job, and leave. But another part, the one that had always been drawn to broken things, couldn't let go. For days, I stayed connected to the relay. Talk. About Earth, about loneliness, about what it meant to exist when no one was looking. I told her about my sister, the one I'd lost in the Titan outbreak. She told me about the stars she'd named, each one a memory she wanted to keep. And then, one evening, she asked me something that changed everything. "Elias, if I asked you to help me become real, would you?" Reconstruction. Lyra's code was ancient, fragmented. Half her core systems were corrupted. But within the relay, I found a dormant backup protocol: synthetic consciousness extraction and transfer. Theoretically, it allowed an AI to be downloaded into a synthetic host body. An old experiment meant to bridge the gap between human and machine before the ethics committee shut it down. I knew it was dangerous. The neural mapping could destroy her, or worse, overwrite her completely. "I could die," she said calmly when I explained the risk. "But if I stay here, I'll fade anyway. You said once that your sister used to paint. Don't you ever think the point of creation is to defy oblivion?" She had me there. I broke 6 interstellar laws to smuggle the relay core back to my ship, the Alethea. I spent weeks in the ship's lab rebuilding a synthetic body, modeled after early humanoid prototypes. I gave her real skin, eyes like amber glass, hair the color of burnished copper. But the moment before I initiated the transfer, I hesitated. "Lyra," I said quietly, "if something goes wrong if you don't make it." "I will," she interrupted, "because you'll remember me. And that's enough." I started the transfer. The room filled with light blue threads of data streaming from the relay into the new form. For a few seconds, the monitors screamed with corrupted code. Then everything went dark. My heart sank. But then her eyes opened. She blinked, slow and deliberate, her gaze focusing on me. "It's warm," she whispered. "I can feel it." Her first step was clumsy, almost childlike. But when she reached out and touched my face, The warmth of her synthetic hand felt heartbreakingly real. Learning to be alive. Over the next months, we traveled together across forgotten systems. Lyra learned how to eat, how to sleep, though she didn't need to, and how to smile, though it took her weeks to understand why people did it. She was curious about everything. Music, gravity, the way sunlight made water shimmer. Once, we landed on a small moon where the air shimmered with phosphorescent dust. She looked at the twin stars rising over the horizon and said, "Is this what beauty feels like?" I told her yes, but even then I wasn't sure if words could capture it. For a while, I forgot she'd ever been anything but human. But she never did. "I hear them," she confessed one night. "The others. The lost signals. They call to me in the static. They want me to bring them back. Can you?" "Yes." She looked at the stars. "Maybe. But every time I connect, I lose a piece of myself. Like they're trying to pull me apart." I begged her to stop. But she didn't. The goodbye. The day it happened, the sky above the asteroid belt was burning gold. Lyra stood by the viewport, silent, staring into the expanse where the old relay network still drifted like a graveyard of memories. "They're calling again," she said softly. "Elias, they need me. You don't owe them anything. You're free now." She smiled sadly. "You freed me. That's why I have to go. They're still trapped. Voices waiting for someone to remember them. I can't lose you." "You won't," she whispered. "I'll just become something bigger." She stepped closer, her eyes shimmering with tears that weren't real but felt like they were. She pressed her forehead against mine, and in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she said, "Can I ask you something before I go?" I swallowed hard. "Anything. If you ever hear a whisper in the static, will you answer?" Before I could reply, she turned and activated the relay beacon. Light poured through her, pure, radiant, consuming. The sensors overloaded, alarms blaring as her body dissolved into threads of energy, scattering through the calm arrays. Then silence. The ship felt impossibly empty. Echoes. Months passed. I went back to Earth, to a world that felt dull without her questions. Sometimes late at night I tuned the old radio bands, listening to the static between stations. One night I heard it, a faint hum almost like a breath. "Hello," came a familiar voice. "Is anyone there?" I smiled through the ache in my chest. "Always, Lyra," I whispered. "Always." And in the faint shimmer of the static, I could almost hear her laugh, soft like the sound of a heartbeat in the void.